I accidentally got locked inside a classroom building with someone who wasn't supposed to be there. This happened during my senior year of college, and it's still probably the most unsettling thing that's ever happened to me. I went to a fairly large university, and like most students, I had a habit of putting off assignments until the last minute. One Thursday night, I had a huge research paper due the next morning. My dorm was loud, the library was packed, and I knew I wouldn't get anything done there. So I decided to work in one of the academic buildings on campus. The building was mostly classrooms and faculty offices. During the day, it was crowded, but at night, it became almost completely empty. I found an unlocked classroom on the third floor around 8 p.m. and started working. The place was dead silent. Every hour or so, I'd hear a door close somewhere in the building, but that was normal. Campus security made rounds throughout the night. Around 10:30 p.m., I realized I hadn't seen another student for hours. I got up to use the bathroom and noticed most of the hallway lights had automatically dimmed. It felt eerie, but not enough to make me leave. I went back to writing. Around midnight, I finally packed my stuff and headed for the stairs. That's when I discovered the main entrance doors were locked. I wasn't too concerned at first. I figured there had to be another exit. I walked to the side entrance. Locked. Back entrance. Locked. Every door I tried required a faculty key card from the inside after hours. I pulled out my phone and searched the university website. Apparently, the building officially closed at 11 p.m. I must have lost track of time. Annoying, but not a huge problem. I figured I'd call campus security and have them let me out. Then I noticed my phone battery was dead. Completely dead. No charger, no way to call anyone. At that point, I was irritated more than anything. I started heading back upstairs because I knew there were office phones in some faculty areas. As I reached the second floor landing, I heard a door close. Not somewhere distant. Close. Very close. I stopped walking. The sound had come from the hallway directly above me. I listened. Nothing. I assumed it was another student who'd gotten stuck inside. Honestly, I was relieved. I headed upstairs. The hallway was empty. Every classroom door was closed. No movement, no voices. I walked the entire length of the corridor and didn't find anyone. That felt strange, but old buildings make weird noises. I convinced myself I imagined it. I eventually found an office phone in a department lounge. The problem was that it required a code to dial outside numbers. I couldn't use it, so now I was stuck until morning. Not ideal. I decided I'd just wait in the classroom where I'd been working. As I walked back toward it, I heard footsteps. Clear footsteps. A steady walking pace from somewhere down the hallway. I looked up immediately. The hallway was empty. The footsteps stopped. Completely. I remember standing there feeling confused. The floor was carpeted, which made sounds travel oddly, but I knew what I'd heard. I called out, "Hello?" No response. I figured somebody was messing around. Maybe another student who didn't want to answer. I went back into my classroom. About 20 minutes later, I heard the footsteps again. This time they were directly outside the room, walking past the doorway, slowly. I got up and looked through the narrow window beside the door. Nobody. The hallway was empty. I sat back down. Then I heard something else. A classroom door opening somewhere nearby, then closing. My stomach immediately dropped. At that point, there was no way I was imagining things. Someone else was in the building. I grabbed my backpack and left the classroom. I started checking rooms, one after another, empty, empty, empty. Then I reached a classroom near the end of the hall. The door was slightly open, maybe 3 inches. I knew it had been closed earlier because I'd walked past it multiple times. I pushed it open, nobody inside, just rows of desks. But something caught my attention immediately. A half-empty energy drink sitting on the professor's desk, still cold. I picked it up. There was condensation on the can. Someone had been there recently, very recently. At that point, I stopped looking. I didn't know who was in the building and I didn't want to find out. I decided to wait near the ground floor entrance until morning. At least security would eventually come unlock the doors. I spent the next 2 hours sitting in a lobby chair. Around 2:30 a.m. I heard footsteps again, this time from the floor above me. Walking, stopping, for nearly 15 minutes. I couldn't see who was making them. Eventually, everything went quiet. Around 5:45 a.m., I finally saw campus security enter through the front doors. I've never been happier to see anyone. I immediately explained what had happened. The officer seemed skeptical until he checked the security cameras. A few hours later, I got a call asking me to come make a statement. According to the footage, another person had entered the building shortly before closing. A man who wasn't a student. He apparently slipped inside behind a group of students and never left. The cameras showed him wandering various floors throughout the night. At one point, he passed the classroom I'd been using several times. The reason I never saw him was because he kept moving between stairwells and hallways whenever he heard someone approaching. Security eventually found him asleep in a storage room on the first floor after the building opened. Turns out he had been using different campus buildings as places to sleep for weeks. Nothing violent happened. He never approached me. But what unsettles me is realizing that for almost 6 hours, there was a stranger roaming an empty academic building with me inside it. Every unexplained footstep I heard that night had been real, and every time I checked the hallway and saw nobody there, he was probably just around the corner waiting for me to leave. I found out someone had been sleeping in the empty dorm room next to mine. This happened during my sophomore year of college. It still makes me uncomfortable to think about, even though it's been a few years. I lived in one of the older dorm buildings on campus. It was one of those concrete cinder block places from the 1970s where every sound echoed through the hallways. The floor I lived on wasn't full because enrollment had dropped that year, so a lot of rooms sat empty. My room was at the very end of the hallway. The room directly beside mine had been vacant since move-in day. At least, that's what I thought. Around mid-October, I started noticing weird things. Nothing major, just little stuff that didn't make sense. The first thing was hearing a door close late at night. I usually stayed up studying until 2 or 3 a.m. A few nights a week, I'd hear the room next door open and shut. It wasn't loud, just enough to notice. I assumed housing had finally assigned someone to the room. The strange part was that I never actually saw anyone move in. No parents, no boxes, no roommate, nothing. A week passed and I still hadn't seen anyone enter or leave. Then one night I came back from the library around 1 a.m. As I walked down the hallway, I noticed a thin strip of light underneath the supposedly empty room's door. I remember slowing down because it surprised me. The next morning, the light was gone. I asked my RA later that day if someone had moved in next door. He looked at me and said, "No, that room's still vacant." I laughed and told him I'd seen the light. He shrugged and said maintenance probably forgot to turn something off. That explanation made enough sense that I stopped thinking about it. For a while. A couple weeks later, I woke up around 4 a.m. needing to use the bathroom. As I opened my door, I heard movement, not from down the hall, from the room next to mine. It sounded like someone quickly shuffling across the floor. Then complete silence. I stood there listening for maybe 10 seconds. Nothing. The hallway bathroom was about 30 feet away. When I came back, I noticed the vacant room's door wasn't fully shut. It was open maybe half an inch. I could see darkness inside. I don't know why, but it gave me a really bad feeling. I went back into my room and locked the door. The next day I told my RA again. This time he actually checked. He unlocked the room while I stood there. Inside was exactly what you'd expect from an empty dorm room. No furniture except the standard beds and desks, no personal belongings, no signs that anyone had been there. He joked that maybe I was hearing ghosts. At the time, I laughed. Looking back, I wish I hadn't. A few days later, something happened that completely changed how I viewed the situation. I came back from class early because one of my professors had canceled. As I walked toward my room, I saw someone at the far end of the hallway. Just a guy, college age, dark hoodie, baseball cap. He was standing outside the vacant room next door. The second he noticed me, he immediately turned and walked toward the stairwell. Not ran, walked, but fast. I remember thinking it was weird because he didn't have a backpack or keys or anything. He disappeared down the stairs before I got close enough to say anything. When I reached the room, the door was completely shut. I tried convincing myself he was visiting someone, but there was nobody to visit. The room was empty. That night, I told my RA exactly what I'd seen. For the first time, he seemed concerned. The next morning, campus housing came to inspect the room. Around noon, I got a knock on my door. It was my RA and 2 campus security officers. They asked me to step into the hallway. One of the officers explained they'd found evidence someone had been entering the room. Apparently, there was a ceiling access panel inside a nearby storage closet that connected to a maintenance space running above several rooms. Whoever it was had been climbing through the maintenance area and dropping into the vacant dorm room through a loose ceiling tile. The room itself looked empty because they weren't keeping belongings there, but security found food wrappers hidden above the ceiling panels, bottles of water, a sleeping bag, and some clothes. Someone had been living there for weeks, maybe months. The part that still bothers me is what they told me afterward. A camera review showed the same unidentified guy entering the building late at night multiple times. He wasn't a student. Nobody ever figured out who he was. The building required student ID access, so security believed he'd either stolen a card or been let in by random students who held doors open. After that, campus security increased patrols and changed several locks. I never saw the guy again. What really gets to me is realizing how close he was. For months, I'd been sleeping less than 10 feet away from a stranger secretly living inside my dorm building. Sometimes when I'd hear those noises at 2 or 3 in the morning, it wasn't pipes or maintenance. It was him. And the fact that he disappeared without ever being identified still makes my skin crawl.